Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Open Dialogue. Firstly, I would like to wish all the viewers and my guests Eid al-Ghadir Mubarak on this auspicious day. After that, I would also like to say that I'm going to be continuing with talks on social issues, but this is going to be something a little bit wider perspective. And I have with me today as my guest, as usual, we have the Sayyid Razavi. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome and thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure and an honor to sit next to you. And we also have a very interesting guest who's going to give much more knowledge and awareness. Is Dr. Hasan Alogaily. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you've just come from work and it's, giving your time, being a family man and working as a doctor. And hopefully today we're going to be discussing the topic about awakening our spirituality. It is really important that we understand that we have the physical side and we do things practically, but where does it come from and the intention? We're going to be questioning spirituality versus even religion because people do separate the two outside our communities and religions. And sometimes with us, we know as Muslims, it is part of our religion to be spiritual. So we're going to be going more into the discussion about trying to create more meaning and purpose so that we can live more fulfilling lives and also help with our daily practices as understanding everyday life and how we can live to the best of our abilities. So without further ado, let's get into this. Doctor, I want to start with you. We have a lot of people that say that being spiritual and being religious also is something slightly different. How do we sort of define this, and how do you personally define this? Because, they say that I've been doing a lot of research and people sort of say that religion has been out for many years, but spirituality is kindly new because it's not institutionalized, it's not giving you a way of being because it's more evolving as to the self. So what do we have in our sort of teachings and the way we should see spirituality?
Yes, well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Essentially, the two are one and the same. Mm-hmm. But if we are to separate the two entities, essentially, the religion is the way of life. It's the practicalities. It's the ahkam. It is the way that we interact with Allah in the way that Allah has ordained to us through the Holy Quran, through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlebait. In terms of spiritualities, it's the substance. Mm-hmm. It is the conscious connection that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that varies in terms of depth from person to person. And today, inshallah, what I will hopefully try to do with your permission, with your viewers' permission, and with the Sayyid's permission, is we will examine the depth of our belief in Allah. Mm-hmm. And the origin for this topic really stems from my day-to-day life as a doctor, and I'm sure many of your viewers are also in the medical field. We often come into touch with patients who experience a lot of adversity within their own life between them and themselves.
Right, yes.
In the form of negativity, which we will talk about later, but also in terms of difficulty interacting with the world around them and in terms of their outlook. And one of the questions we ask as doctors is, do you have a faith? Mm. In some occasions people answer in the positive, they have a faith, mm-hmm. and that can be of many other faiths in addition to Islam. And we try to encourage that aspect of their life to try and point patients towards there being potential therapy in their own faith and consulting people, within the faith.
I didn't realise that. Is that part of, Well,
it's one aspect of our sort of assessment of patients who have,
interesting. Okay.
Depression or anxiety disorders, things like that. In a sense, it's a holistic medicine. Mm-hmm. So, you're taking people in every facet and every direction that you can in terms of finding solutions for them. For some people, faith is the avenue. We are very lucky and blessed to have this magnificent and majestic and mysterious religion of Islam that is so rich in its embracement of life in all its aspects. And what I feel I would like to start with in terms of focusing for this evening is actually talking about belief in Allah. Mm-hmm. I'm sure as the Sayyid will also
he's going to give us
agree.
all the knowledge behind
People,
his studies.
That's right. People believe in Allah at different levels.
Absolutely.
The weakest of belief, the weakest form of belief, if you like, for want of a better term, is to believe in Allah for the sake of chance.
Okay.
It is to say, for instance, that Allah might exist, but He might not exist.
But we're going to do it anyway.
I'm going to do it anyway, just in case I die and suddenly I realize I haven't actually died.
Yeah.
In fact, I am more awake than I was when I was alive. And I am facing judgment. At least I have done something in my life to kind of increase my chances in the hereafter and judgment. Moving up from there, there are people who believe in Allah out of fear, because they fear Allah's wrath and His punishment. They fear Yawm al-Qiyam, they fear hell and the repercussions of that. And moving further up from there, in terms of the higher form of belief in Allah, it is love.
Love, yes.
We pray not because Allah needs us to pray, but it's because He deserves our prayer.
We're grateful, yeah.
It is the hamd that we give to Allah. We say Alhamdulillah with every breath of our life until we breathe no more. And it is that level of belief that we should try to strive for. Because fear, although it works, in my mind, fear tends to stir a lot of physical and psychological negativity potentially.
Yeah.
It is a hot topic currently in terms of our youth, in terms of schools where they worry that as Muslims or as Christians or as Jews, we are instilling an environment of repercussions and of fear amongst our children. That if you do not do this, X will happen. If you do not go there, X will happen. And that it's very much a cause and effect, sort of conundrum for them, that they have to do things because of the consequences of punishment. But we don't have to go there. We can go beyond that. I have a scientific mind, and we're all different in terms of how we arrive at the belief of Allah. Most of us will have been born into Muslim families, and our belief has been passed on to us through our parents, and we have our parents to thank for that. But it mustn't stop there. We need to explore our belief. We need to try and develop our belief. We need to try and fortify and enrich our belief in Allah, because there is no limit. Because Allah is limitless. There is no limit in how high we can elevate our belief. And it goes without saying that by elevating one's belief and connection and relationship with Allah, that will confer on our own lives so much benefits in terms of our strength in dealing with others, our strength in reacting to catastrophes, our strength in not just bad but good times as well, and in giving to others and in giving to our communities. So in my mind, one of the things that struck me is that belief in Allah is belief in the unseen.
Yes, of course. That's what most people talk and relate to religion as.
That's right. But what I would like today to do is to actually use science and something that is seen. In the Holy Quran, it is referred to as the signs, to relate to you the journey of creation, of life itself, and what science tells us. And at the end of each aspect of this step in this chain of events that has occurred, I will relate to you glimpses from the Holy Quran.
Okay.
Now, I have no authority to be an interpreter of the Holy Quran, and I leave these verses as verses that I have stumbled upon in fascination.
Yeah, and research, just your own research, of course, which we all do, yes.
And obviously they are open to more authoritative interpretation.
Okay, before we go into that, I want to speak to the Sayyid. I think, because when you were talking and what you touched on made me think about how we actually teach our religion. So when there's the fear and the intention of how we have different levels of belief, do you think that there's a bit of responsibility now that we need to start evolving in the way in which we teach Islam, the way in which we see it to begin with, and that's when maybe we can have a better way of living it as a way of life without having that fear-mongering or just taking it from the fact that we were born with it, but we're taking the responsibility to actually own it and be curious and question and actually take it upon ourselves, whether or not our parents are looking at us at a certain stage and age, because we've taken it on ourselves. So I think the teaching of Islam needs to also maybe sometimes evolve, improve, and not just taken to the scriptures, but also instilling more of the spirituality and the benefits. What is your take on this, Sayyid?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I would like to also congratulate the auspicious occasion of Al-Ghadir, which is considered to be as very important Eid for all. And I received a text message from someone saying that Ayatollah Bahjat used to consider this as the most important Eids, and he used to say that this is the Eid that should be celebrated for 3 continuous days.
Yes.
Because it took 3 days for the people to do bay'ah on the hands of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. So it's a continuous Eid for 3 days, and we are blessed to be the followers of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may Allah keep us on the right path and amongst the true followers of Ahlebait alayhi salatu wasalam, as this TV channel is named after Ahlebait alayhi salatu wasalam as well. As far as the topic is concerned, yes, the beauty of Islam is that it speaks to people on different level, and there was absolutely no restriction from Islamic point of view, from Quran, from teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, from Prophet Muhammad, to restrict the way we believe, the way we think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And practically Prophet Muhammad and holy Imams proved that by, for example, if they visited a layman, they would speak to them about God in a very, very layman's language.
Yes, yes.
And if they spoke to some kind of scientist who claimed to know a lot, they would speak in a very scientific language, and this is the method Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used in Quran as well. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in places invites you to just look at the creation of an ant. In other places invites you to look at skies and heavens. Another place invites you to look at the depth, in the depth of the oceans and sea, and discover your Lord, and or look at yourself, the creation of yourself, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you. And also in Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam's teachings, we find Imam Ali or all Imams speaking to people in different levels. And there is actually a saying in Arabic, and it might be a hadith similar to that as well, which says that we should speak to people according to their intellect and understanding. It's not an art to speak to someone who does not understand much in a very academic level. This reminds me of the universities I occasionally go to speak in Latin America and other places. The professors once told me that we invite Muslim scholars to give lecture, and they spend several months of writing speeches, and they come and give a very deep lecture which is not even understood by any of the university students, because they don't know anything about Islam. Because he told me that if I wanted to teach Islam in my university, I will run a course and invite students to put their names down and register themselves, and then understand Islam in a depth. But these students, they don't know anything about Islam, so we need to speak to them as if they don't know anything. I used to be a member of an editorial board of one of the newspapers in Iran, and the first day I joined the newspaper, the chief editor of that newspaper came to me and said, I know you Molanas like to express your knowledge. And this is newspaper. This newspaper may go in the hands of a person who does not know anything about Islam. So whenever you're writing, whenever you're explaining, assume that there is someone who does not understand anything. So start speaking in a very layman's language, and then when you discover there is a possibility of elaborating more on academic level or scientific level, then you do that. So the reason I mentioned all these points is there is absolutely no restriction from Islamic point of view in recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from all different ways. I mean, a scientist would discover his Lord from a scientific points of views. And like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam visited that old lady who had become ill, and he asked her, why did you become Muslim? She said she used to spin the wheel and make this thread out of it and make a living out of that. She was, again, when Prophet Muhammad was visiting, she was spinning the wheel. He said, look, if I move my finger out of this spinning wheel, it stops. So how can it be possible to believe the days and nights and the system of this universe is running without someone taking care of it? So that was very simple reason of her to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, I understand.
But I'm sure if a scientist had gone to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there are examples of that as well, people who were very knowledgeable men, and they had a very deep discussion about existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with Prophet Muhammad. And
I think that's really interesting how you've sort of put that into context, because even though we're discussing the science, but yes, you know, the level of language and the level of understanding and who your audience is and who you're speaking to does differ from time to time. So it's very important. But we are sitting here with a scientist, a doctor, even someone who does martial arts and teaches in, you know, his spare time to the youth. And mashallah, you are, you know, giving so much of your time and so much of your energy, even personally. And, you know, I know that you are a family man and you still manage to do all of this. So maybe the science works for you, and you need to obviously spread that for all of us viewers. So what was your point that you wanted to highlight from before?
I'm going to take us on a journey, essentially, and inshallah this won't take very long, but I hope that we will benefit some of your viewers in this journey, inshallah. It is a scientific journey, but with contrasts from the Holy Quran.
Okay.
And this is what I find fascinating. And like I said, I reiterate again for our viewers that I am not interpreting these verses. They are simply there for us to contrast against. And the meaning may be entirely different.
Of course, yes.
So, as a doctor, I think the likeliest thing for me would have been to actually relate to you the story of creation from the point of view of the egg, the human embryo, the fetus. But actually I sat and pondered on this, and I thought, let's go much higher. Let's start with the Big Bang.
Okay,
Okay, let's start with the beginning of time, that we call the beginning, the confines of our existence. Essentially, that we as human beings are restricted according to time, whereas Allah transcends time. And therefore, in science, when you come across scientists who give you the argument that, you know, this atheistic talk that, it's difficult to believe in God because it's incompatible with science, you know, that it's not helpful to bring God into these discussions. But actually, in my opinion, they are not in fact wrong. Because you can't bring Allah and science quite literally together, because Allah transcends even science that we know.
Exactly, so that's the way you're looking at it,
That's right. A very famous and well-known professor of mathematics from Oxford University, John Lennox, who some of you may have heard of.
I've heard of him, yes.
I'll quote from an interview he had. He says, "I'm a pure mathematician, and when I teach mathematics, I don't mention God at all. And if I was designing a rocket locomotive, we don't mention God at all. God doesn't arise in the practicality of science, even biology, where the deeper questions are, why can we do science at all? What is it about this universe that allows us to do science?" And there I would begin to see the fingerprint of the divine mind. So, as an example, you will not find God at the bottom of a piston cylinder in an engine, and so therefore there is no point in even entertaining that. Nevertheless, Islam is the why, it is the who, and science is the how. So essentially the two interface very well together, and the Quran, whilst it is not a science book by any means, is rich with its mysteries, and we will come across that now. So let's start from the beginning. Over 1,000 years ago, things had to have occurred by chance, literally by chance, in order for us humans to exist today on this earth, this planet. left to chance alone, the probability of our existence is crushingly small. Chance alone, as in coming back to the analogy of this spindle wheel, without having a driver making those decisions with a reason and a purpose, the chance of it occurring just purely to chance alone is infinitesimally small. It is not zero, but it is infinitesimally small. So let's go back 13.8 billion years ago to what we know in chronological science today as the beginning. 13.8 billion years ago, the Big Bang seemed like the greatest chance event known to the history of man in the story of human existence. A sudden and chance explosion from an infinitely dense singularity, rapidly expanding into the void of nothing. Absolutely nothing, at over 100 billion degrees Kelvin of heat. Now that is more than 250,000 times the heat of our own sun. The ingredients were created, a set of numbers called constants of nature, such as the speed of light, the strength of gravity, the number and dimensions of space, which we observe in science today. Remarkably, these numbers just seem to fit exactly right for our universe to sustain life on Earth. And so it is astounding that we have actually won this cosmic lottery. In Surah Al-Anbiya, Ayah 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Are then they who are bent on denying the truth not aware that the heavens and the earth were once a single entity, which we then parted asunder, and that we made out of water every living thing? Will not then they begin to believe?
Amazing.
And if that wasn't enough, we can go further to illuminate the seconds, the minutes, and the hours following the Big Bang by reflecting deeper. The universe at this point is expanding. In 1912, Veso Slipher discovered that light from remote galaxies was redshifted, and what that means is that galaxies were receding from Earth. Since then, this cosmic inflation, this expansion, has been confirmed and coined through Hubble's law, which is considered the first observational basis for the expansion of the universe. And this gives further evidence to the Big Bang theory. Coming back to the Quran, in Surah Al-Dhariyat, Ayah 47, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. It is we who have built the heaven with our creative power, and verily it is we who are steadily expanding it. Moving forward 4.6 billion years ago, there are billions of solar systems in our galaxy, but the one we call home might never have come to being without another interstellar accident. The death of a star born billions of years before our own sun, exploding and superheating a cloud of dust which then formed our own sun, along with a spinning disk of matter that then collided and became planets, basically. 4.5 billion years ago, Earth gets a moon, but it is almost destroyed in the process. Another young planet, born in our early solar system, crashed into the young Earth with such devastating force. Both the Earth and this other planet almost blasted into 1 trillion pieces. But Earth survived, and the debris that crashed together in its orbit around Earth's gravitational pull, so you've got these rocks that are going around Earth floating, but eventually they crashed together, formed the moon that we know. What would life be like here without a moon? We ask ourselves. So we have to ask ourselves the what-ifs in order to understand the miracle of life itself. It would be a very different world indeed. The tides at sea would dramatically be reduced, as would something called tidal drag, which is actually Earth's brakes. Essentially, Earth would spin faster if we didn't have a moon, and reducing the length of our days. Without the moon stabilizing the 23.5 degrees of the Earth's tilt, the Earth's axis, the gravity of other planets would have a big effect on the Earth, and that would send our Earth into a wobble, creating chaos amongst our seasons. And essentially would make Earth inhabitable for us. We would also be more vulnerable to bombardments by rockets from space. You know that the moon is cratered, and that's because it is absorbing a lot of meteorites, a lot of rockets. we would have no solar or lunar eclipses. We would have no calendars based on months. No month after all, since the word month stems from a word that means month. Nowhere for astronauts to visit. In Surah Al-Anbiya, ayah 32 and 33, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ سَقْفًا مَحْفُوظًا وَهُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. And we have made the heaven a guarded canopy, yet they turn aside from its signs. وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. And He it is who created the night and the day and the sun and the moon, all traveling along swiftly in their celestial spheres. I just want to pause for a minute, and as I carry on, I want our listeners to remember these verses were related and referred to a man known as Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we have to just sit and ponder on this point for a minute. How could this man have come out with all of these things?
Of course.
And I'll carry on. 4 billion years ago, Earth was a ball of molten lava with a surface temperature of 1,200 degrees Celsius. Now, can you imagine a drop of water settling on a surface of 1,200 degrees? It's impossible. It's inconceivable. So the question is then, I ask you, how is it that we have water here and seas? Where did that come from? Where did our water come from? Some was probably trapped deep in the earth, in the planet, which could then be released through volcanic eruptions. But how did the earth cool to allow that water to settle? The majority of this water came from beyond our space in the form of icy rockets, in the form of icy meteorites, bombarding the earth time after time in its hundreds and its thousands, eventually cooling the earth until that water came and eventually settled. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, ayah 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً بِقَدَرٍ فَأَسْكَنَّاهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِنَّا عَلَى ذَهَابٍ بِهِ لَقَادِرُونَ. And we send down water from the cloud according to a measure. Then we cause it to settle in the earth, and most surely we are able to carry it away. So, as Michio Kaku, an American theoretical physicist and co-founder of the string field theory, once said, the next time you drink a cup of water, you are actually drinking asteroid or meteor juice that has come from another part of the galaxy. 65 million years ago, dinosaurs, we know, dominated the Earth, as they had done for 160 million years. Then an asteroid almost 6 miles across hit the Earth with an impact equivalent to over 1 billion Hiroshima bombs, and blasts rock and dust out into the atmosphere, shrouding the planet that we have into darkness. Over half of all life on Earth was wiped out, including most of the dinosaurs, and without this, we would have never existed, we would have never flourished. In Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 164, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَالْفُلْكِ الَّتِي تَجْرِي فِي الْبَحْرِ بِمَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ وَمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مِنْ مَاءٍ فَأَحْيَا بِهِ الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا وَبَثَّ فيها من كل دابة وتصريف الرياح والسحاب, until the end of the ayah. Most surely in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and the day, and the ships that run in the sea with that which profits men, and the water that Allah sends down from the cloud and gives life with it to the earth after its death, and spreads in it all kinds of animals, and the changing of the winds and the clouds made subservient between the heaven and the earth. There are signs for a people who understand. So we have reflected on the breathtaking collaboration between science and the Holy Quran, the story of creation itself. So if we are still in any doubt, let us talk about the odds. Let us reflect on the probabilities. Now, these figures are for illustrative purposes only, and we don't insist that they are accurate. In reality, it is actually very difficult for us to know.
Yes.
And if you will read texts and if you will surf the internet, you will come across a variety of figures.
Of course.
But this is for illustration as to the unlikely possibility of our existence, and the need, therefore, for us to understand that there must have been intelligent design, i.e. a creator, i.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 1 in 10 to the power of 40,000. Those are the chances that life could form from non-life as an inanimate object. So let me put that into perspective. That is like rolling 2 dices and landing a pair of 6s 50,000 times in a row.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Wow.
1 in 10 to the 67th power. Those are the chances of amino acids combining to form the necessary proteins through undirected means. That is like taking 10 to the 67th power pound coins, painting one black, putting them in an area 3 times the size of the UK, so that is roughly 695,000 kilometers squared, which would cover the UK 3 times 50 feet deep. Mix it all up, and then pick the black one on the first try. These are numbers that have come from a book called Evolution from Space by Sir Fred Hoyle.
I wish I had you as my science teacher growing up. I probably would have passed.
In Surah Fussilat, Ayah 53, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق أولم يكفي بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد. We will soon show them our signs in the universe and in their own souls until it will become quite clear to them that it is the truth. Is it not sufficient as regards your Lord that He is witness over all things? Essentially what we have related to are examples of signs, and this is just an iota of what the Quran actually talks about, because we haven't even gone into biology and the development of the human.
I was about to say, you've chosen obviously the existence and how we've come to being, but even after that, and even now, with regards to science and things that are actually in existence that we cannot explain, and the seas and the earth and the plants. I know even David Attenborough has mentioned many times, because he has the Discovery Channel and he goes out there with nature for many years, saying that there is absolutely no way, looking at this life and how things are and how it's discovered, that it's just by chance. Even, someone without our faith can see that, who is a scientist, who is, exploring day by day. His entire life is exactly that.
That's right. That's right. And we can go one step further into monotheism as opposed to polytheism. From a scientific basis, look at the regularity of life, the order of life.
Of course, how it
the night and the day.
Yes.
One does not precede the other. Atoms are always atoms. Helium is always helium. The earth will always be earth and be subject to those laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics.
Yes.
Newton's first law of motion, which states that an object always remains in a state of rest unless another object exerts a pressure on it. And so this, for us as monotheists, believing in the oneness of Allah from a scientific perspective, adds evidence, because we don't have chaos occurring.
Yeah, it's so
You don't have
perfect.
one dimension occurring here, another dimension happening here, and laws of physics suddenly changing, abruptly. And that is just one other little glimpse and aspect, which is another subject. But I want to say that the Quran, when it came down on the earth, is a book for all time.
Yes.
It wasn't for the people of 1,400 years ago.
No, absolutely not.
And what I have talked about is evidence of that, because science is discovering things that only now we are looking at the Quran and actually saying, actually this has been talked about before in the Quran before. And we will go on to continue to discover more things, and the future is exciting.
And we're still referring to the Quran as in discovering that even though the new scientific discoveries, the Quran has already mentioned it to a certain extent.
Right.
And as you were talking, I've always pondered about this, and even when I've not gone into the research that you've done, but just listening and reading certain books about science and Quran and religion, and how much our religion, just for me, it was very simple to understand that my belief is real and I can continue, because as I was growing up as a teenager, I had many questions as well, outside what my parents had taught me with regards to existence, meaning and purpose. And that alone sort of gave me that insight to say, yes, there is definitely a true creator and a believer. But someone like yourself who is a scientist, doctor or intellectual, and there are people that are in the same level as you, if not more, and are doing all this research, and they can come up with these sort of answers, but they still remain adamant. Now, obviously for me, not just because I came from a background of being brought up as a Muslim, but for me, I also did query, and it was logical. It was consciously made sense for me. I use that sort of way. I'm just still curious as to why is there still that doubt? Why is there still, even more so now?
It's a very good question, and I'm curious equally as well. And actually, if I come back to John Lennox, he, in another interview recently, or actually if you go onto his website, you will find this on his website. Now, John Lennox is a devout Christian monotheist, a theist basically. But he is profound in his knowledge of mathematics, and he has arrived at a belief in God from evidence-based commitment, as he describes it. So what he says is, he basically says either human intelligence ultimately owes human intelligence, either human intelligence, and I want you to bear with me here, either human intelligence ultimately owes its origin to mindless matter, or there is a creator. It is strange that it is their intelligence that leads them to prefer the first to the second. But I find when I've listened, and it's actually quite risky. I have to warn the viewers here. If you are going to think about watching a YouTube video or an internet discussion or interview with any scientist who is an atheist, there is a risk, a real risk that you will be convinced.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you embark upon these lectures or these discussions, it's very important that you go in there armed to the teeth with your initial commitment, because once you have committed yourself to a belief based on evidence, you've got to stand by that evidence. Otherwise, you've got to question your own thought process. And atheists have their own thought process, and they're entitled to that.
Of course.
And actually, I find discussion with atheists very healthy.
Yeah,
for both of us.
The same.
Because actually, they may say things. Because they may say things occasionally that they haven't realized.
Yes.
Are actually defeatist.
Definitely.
In their own makeup. And I might actually realize that there are theories that I have held that were evidence for God's existence that are actually not true. Because science is evolving.
Yes, it is.
And what I'm saying today has been proved by experimental science is correct. Tomorrow, science may disprove.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's obviously always evolving.
But I find a common theme amongst atheists. Sadly and unfortunately, I think the reason why we find that people arrive at these logical conclusions scientifically and make these contrasts and go further than this, but yet still arrive at the conclusion that there is no God, they look at the practice of religion in the world.
Exactly. I was about to say that. They look at
the negative side to it.
Yeah.
They look at terrorism and where that comes from. They look at, they look at the Christian medieval era and the use, for instance, of slaves during that time, and wars. And they in fact, they use the conflict. They use the conflict argument quite a lot. That they say what they say is religion is the cause for all conflict and argument in the world. And it isn't enough to say that people are doing it in the name of religion.
Yes.
It is the religion that is causing this conflict and these wars.
Up till today, that's the whole main basis of their argument.
That's
right. Religion is the cause of everything.
And I think that for any human being will cloud your impression. I mean,
it depends on how they think.
Yeah.
I think it also takes a particular individual.
Yes.
To obviously firstly have that mindset and use it as an excuse, or someone who just only sees things the way they want to see it, because they've already got the answers for them. And if people just are more curious and just question without sort of prejudice, then it does open up a different light, because we could say the same about other people. As Muslims, do you find people that are, really prejudiced and really racist, according to the nationalization, being sort of patriotic to their country, or now because, of course, we're against the gays and the lesbians and whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, our Islam has these rules, but we also have the morals and the ethics behind it, which we don't follow. And that's why I always come back to Islam being, this perfect religion and perfect way, but we are still continuously learning and striving to evolve to actually represent that. And that's where the problem is.
That's right. And actually, if you take atheistic discussions through to their extreme end, what you will find is that you are faced with an ultimatum. You will find yourself saying to the atheist, okay, let's give up God. Let's give up religion. Let's give up all of these things that we're doing, let's give up our prayer, our fast, our hajj, what you'll find is these atheists will come back and say, but then there lies a problem. And what is that problem? We as human beings cannot just sit as aesthetic people.
I was just going to, and it comes to the next point about that negativity
Yes,
thoughts.
there is something within the human being in his nature that separates us from animals, and that comes into the self, the nafs al-mutma'inna, nafs al-lawama, and all these things. That is inbuilt, that Allah has built within us, every one of us, regardless how sinful or how, how holy you are.
Yes.
All of us have the same innate capacity to feel that need for transcendence, for illumination. And that is something that even atheists will agree on. But they don't. But their argument is that the religion isn't the
It's not the answer,
It's some
no.
sort of something else which they can't explain.
Well, the pill, the depression. Well, that's why, we find even like the way in which the world is now evolving with so much technology, so much science, but the human is not actually fulfilled in the same way.
Correct.
And they're
That's
not
correct.
actually catching up, and they're not actually benefiting really.
Yes.
So there are people that are questioning. There is more mindfulness. Why is that coming in? Why more positive psychology? Where does all that come from even? Also a lot of these self-development specialists and gurus, when I was studying my course, they said the highest level of personal development is obviously thinking spiritually and something higher, more than yourself.
Yes.
So when you look at all these people that even may or may not come from our religion, they see that. And it gives people that sense, even when teenagers are lost. Well, our teenage, they may be to a certain extent because they're not being taught in a particular way, but we have the answers for them.
Yeah.
We've got reason, meaning, and purpose behind everything that comes and happens, even when it comes to death, even when it comes to whatever it may be, whereas other people cannot explain it to their children, and they're scared.
That's right. The other reason why we find atheists also find difficulty in believing in God is because they feel that they do not want to believe in a God that causes or allows bad things to happen.
That's the other thing. I was listening to another very prominent lecturer, and he was also talking about that, like we always blame God, but we don't realize that we have the free will and we have responsibility. And if we choose, for example, to do certain things that we've got the top 3% that have the most amount of money in this world, now that's a choice where we could distribute that properly, and then there wouldn't be a problem. Where does God come into it? It's just the fact that we're choosing to be and live in that way. It's a very simple, obviously, explanation, but also causes of certain things. But then we also realize through certain attributes of challenge and trauma, we grow, we learn from our strengths through those sort of ways, but we just expect this life to be perfect and the Hollywood sort of way. Say it quickly before we move on with Dr. Hasan here. I just want to go more into our religion as to the way in which we are teaching right now. Again, I know you spoke earlier about talking in different languages, but we need to step up and challenge ourselves, because we are at that level where we are exposed to a lot of things. People are actually, even our teenagers, and they have so much more ability to take in information and understand. But I think that we as Muslims teaching in our schools and portraying Islam and displaying Islam in a particular way hasn't changed that much, and I don't see it actually benefiting the youth to a certain extent, or even the adults that are moving away from it. And that's why they can actually be more believing towards the scientific or the atheist way of thinking. So how can we drive that back into saying that, okay, we've got the rituals, we've got, the general habits that we usually use. What more do we need to do that maybe the scriptures can allow us to say, well, it's nothing wrong in doing something different to your grandparents, or, the way in which these Arabic schools are taught right now and the way in which Islam is taught right now, that is so scary for them to evolve?
Well, there are narrations that teach us to teach our children for the future.
Exactly.
Although the narration is very simple, but it is very
I
open
always
and
refer
clear.
to that, yes. Yeah.
So it means that the way my father and my parents have brought me up is not going to be beneficial for future generation. I have to speak to them in their own language. It doesn't mean that language that
Has
we
to
speak.
stop, yeah.
I mean, they have to be addressed in a modern way and in a scientific way.
You say modern, I think most Muslims get scared with that because they associate Western, modern, and all of these today things as a hindrance and actually against our belief.
Yeah, look at Imam Jafar Sadiq. In his classes, he did not fear in inviting non-believers, even atheists, to the class. Even those people who would abuse him, who would be abusive, use abusive language, and he didn't have any fear. So this is the method that our ulama and scholars have to practice. They should not be, first of all, they should be able to defend Islam and Islamic values. They should not continuously bring up the Hausa students the way they were brought up in the past. They should progress as well, so they are able to answer the questions in a modern way. But at the same time, they should not be afraid of challenges.
Yes.
And this is what Imam Jafar Sadiq did. This is what Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam did. The reason he's called Imam Baqir, because he opened the doors of knowledge to Islam, and he invited others to sit down at his lessons and challenge it.
Doctor, do you feel that we are quite scared of change and movement and evolving? And that's probably one of the reasons why we're not growing in our religion to the extent to what the real scriptures actually say.
I think we live in a very scrutinized part of the world in terms of us being scrutinized. And I think a lot depends on, in terms of evolution of one's practice, one's belief, one's faith. We are actually bombarded. We are bombarded by society around us that is resulting in a lot of brakes being put on for our development going forward. Things like social media, Facebook. Children are have accessibility to mobile phones very easily nowadays. Things like that. And all of that is great. I mean, it provides us a lot of information, but in there lies a lot of distraction. And there are a lot of barriers within and amongst our society for us to develop ourselves and our spirituality and to go forward in terms of developing ourselves. So we've got to try and overcome those barriers. I think one of the things that I was going to talk about later on was reflection.
Well, we can do that now. And just before we continue, I just want to remind the viewers this is a live calling show. If you want to share your thoughts and ideas, if you have any questions even for the doctor or the Sayyid, please do call in. This is a live show and it's open for you to actually have your say as well. So the details should be at the bottom of your screen.
So, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with a purpose, okay? And that purpose is basically to worship Him. But that's the simplistic sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a higher sense, He created us to know Him. I mean, Christians believe that we were created in the image of God. And I think that's very metaphorical.
Yeah.
In some sense, I agree with it.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breathed in our souls.
He says He's closer to us. Yeah,
and He is closer to us than our jugular vein. So we do not need to look further than the cornea of our eye to realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He created us to manifest everything that is good in Himself through us as acting as godly people on this earth. And worship is a means for us to elevate ourselves and a means for us to connect with Allah. So we were created with a path of self-knowing, self-realization and purification, and ultimately to defeat shaitan amongst ourselves. And for us to be victorious over ourselves in order for us to reach our ultimate destination in the hereafter, the Jannah, inshallah, for us all.
Sure.
To do good in this world and be successful in this world and the next. Not to sell this world.
No. Yeah.
For the not to sell the after
life
for the sake of this world.
Yeah.
If somebody came up to me in the street and said, "Okay, I know you're going to heaven. Tell you what, I'll trade your place. I'll give you $6 billion. Now I know $6 billion will make me very happy. There are people who say money doesn't make you happy.
It does.
I disagree.
I totally agree. Yeah, of course,
Right?
it does make you happy. Yeah.
But would I actually engage in that transaction? If that was a real, I mean, I'm being really, really facetious here, but if that was a real transaction and I knew for certain, guaranteed that I'm going to heaven, this is a fixed time. And that 6 billion will come with all the suffering. I'm still going to get ill. I'm still going to feel pain. I'm still going to feel sad.
Yeah.
In heaven, none of these things exist.
Yeah.
And it's forever. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave mankind without His guidance. And alhamdulillah, alladhi hadana wa ja'alna min al-muslimin, through the Holy Quran, through the Prophet and the Ahlebait alayhim salam. And these individuals came to us with the purpose of awakening our soul. The holy Imams, the Prophet, awakening human nature and to charge it from an unconscious state to the conscious. They came to help and support and to guide us, basically, and to pay attention to higher moral values. Imam Sajjad was asked once, who is the most exalted, most noble person? Imam Sajjad replied, the one who does not regard this world worthy of the greatness of his self. So let us now talk about the self. What is the self that we are talking about here? Human beings are the most complicated creation of Allah. The one who is able to select, to think, to calculate, to weigh up, to make those decisions. And through combination of our physical and spiritual power, we are able to overcome our obstacles and move obstacles away from our path. We create the history of our own life through enrichment of knowledge inherited from our predecessors, from our parents, our teachers, our ulama, and make smoother the path and advancement for others and future generations. And that's why I would like to dedicate this to our youth. They are the thinkers, the thinkers and the scientists of our futures and leaders of tomorrow. Unfortunately, in the midst of our struggle with nature and improving the quality of our life, the most precious reality that has been forgotten is our nafs, our self, and how we can develop that. In other words, what has been forgotten is our self-training, our reflection, purification, aiming to become a more perfect human being. And that is why coming to somebody like yourself as a life coach, for those who are unable to kind of move the fog away from themselves, it is possible to have help and be able to sort of achieve or reach those aims. A human being who Allah has created the most superior of creation, where commentators of the Revelation have said whoever has identified the self has identified and recognized his creator. Self-forgetfulness, negligence of one's true self, an underestimation of one's inner potential for achieving moral perfection and purity. This is the pain which has inflicted a lot of people within society, modern human societies. As I said, the domination of technology, overemphasis of materialism, or worshipping this world, it has clouded our ability to transcend and to become more spiritual beings.
But we're here to be challenged.
We are, and we grow in the face of that challenge, so long as we have the building blocks to be able to respond to those challenges in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way, as I'll come to in a minute. As Muslims, our greatest aim in life is the struggle, and our struggle to be victorious over our self, the so-called jihad al-akbar. Of course, this isn't possible without consciously walking and taking steps along the path towards self-purification and defending ourselves using our willpower, our determination, our self-restraint from moving anything away from us that takes us into darkness. A person who is on this journey reflects in. So reflecting in basically means when I perform an action, I'm thinking about what I'm doing. Conscious reflection, being in the present, and thinking about what I'm doing, where I'm going, why I'm doing this, before we embark on those actions, using all our energy and strength and courage, basically, to be able to migrate spiritually towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I think nowadays we worry more about what society will think of us, and that's what makes and drives our decisions, really.
That's right. And a famous poet once beautifully summarized this voyaging human being, this spiritual warrior, if you like, and this path towards self-perfection. In his verse, he says, I remained vigilant, guarding the heart's premises every night so that no alien thought except my beloved's, Allah, could make its entry into my heart. So this supervision of one's self is very important. Having that, some people call it the external eye. So some people say, I think, therefore I am. I mean, we need to coach ourselves. That's right. We need to be the person that's outside our physical body, looking in, reflecting, talking to ourselves, and reflecting on who we are, why we are, what we are doing, and how we can improve. So before moving on, it's very important for me at this stage to recognize that in order for us to move forward, it doesn't mean ignoring this world and its affairs.
Of course not.
On the contrary, ignoring our social responsibilities as people within society, as lawyers, as teachers, as doctors, as parents, as children, needing to learn, ignoring all of that is not a prerequisite for all of this migration. On the contrary, it is inconsistent with this journey, as Islam demands from all Muslims, while we are simultaneously living amongst people, that we discharge our social obligations within our society, but at the same time mustn't be ignorant of ourselves. So how can we begin this journey? Where do we start? I mean, how do we take ourselves from A to B in this? One of the greatest physical analogies of our life moving through this kind of confined time, in Arabic we say from min al-mahdi ila al-lahdi, from the cradle to the grave, with all its obstacles, its trials, its tribulations. You can think of a person standing on a ship.
Okay.
It is all he has to keep him from drowning, and relies on this ship being strong and free from any defect. This is his nafs.
Okay.
This is his self. Just to try and illustrate what we mean by this. You can think of the sea around him as the society and the world around him, constantly battering this self side to side, with its highs taking you on good times and the lows taking you on the low times in life, as we all go through. Forces pushing him this way and that. This is what we must guard ourselves from. This is what we must defend ourselves against, because we must recognize the harm that can come from good, as well as the harm that can come from bad. Where has this ship come from? Where was its origin? Where is it going? Where is its destination? What is guiding him along this voyage and giving him the knowledge? His spiritual compass. This is Islam. This is the Quran. This is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the Imams of Ahlebait. This is our centers of spiritual nourishment and revival. So the first step to this journey is we need to become self-aware. We need to understand what the human self is comprised of. And this is quite a deep discussion as
it
the
is,
self.
but it's definitely needed.
On the one hand, there is the higher self, and on the other hand, there is the lower self, the animalistic self. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, self is like a precious jewel. Whoever strives for its perfection will help him in attaining exalted positions. Whoever acts negligently in its protection shall pull him towards humiliation. Whoever knows the worth of his self will never allow himself to be indulging into passing worldly amusements and shameful deeds. Here referring to the higher self. On the other hand, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, your greatest enemy is yourself, which is located between your two sides. I.e., that our greatest enemy is us. Imam Sajjad said, O Allah, I do complain to you against the self which continuously commands to indulge into sinful acts and deviations, stands up against your wrath and punishment, and pulls me towards the path of absolute destruction. This referring to the lower animalistic self. And we are physical beings. We must strike a balance between the two. We must eat, we must sleep, we must drink, but we mustn't overindulge into the
there's always the
physical
balance.
self. We must strike the balance. But the lower self must submit to our conscious control and struggle against it through waging a personal internal battle, like you said. So there exists this continuous confrontation between these two selves, the higher that wants to take us elevated towards Allah, the lower which wants to go to the cinema, to go to the most expensive restaurant, wants to buy the nicest car. All of these things aren't bad, but they are distractions.
Yes. And how far are you going to be taken away with it?
There is a verse in the Quran, and I'm sure the Sayyid may help me with this, because I don't remember it. It's that dunya lahun wa zinatun. It is a distraction.
Yes, this world is.
It is a distraction from the
Lahw
true
la'ib and
reality.
zinatul hayat ad-dunya.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, it is truly, this world is a distraction from reality.
It's been mentioned many times. Yes.
And we must be conscious of that. So the lower animal self continuously strives to dominate us in this world, every second of every day, amusing us with whims, with passions, closing that path to perfection with Allah. While on the contrary, the higher self strives to attain the spiritual levels. The fight continues until one becomes victorious over the other, essentially. So at this point, I would like to move us over to negativity, which is one of the subjects we wanted to delve into.
Negativity, yes, quickly, because also obviously we now have this huge dilemma and of mental health, and also as you mentioned, yes, I'm qualified as a life coach and NLP practitioner, done existentialism, positive psychology, mindfulness, you name it. And what you have been saying has opened up when I was studying that, our religion gives us all the answers. We don't know how to look at it philosophically, psychologically, and scientifically in a way to bring it to our practical living. And when you were talking about the inner battle and our self is, when I studied, we were talking about the inner dialogue that we have with our minds. We've got to understand how we think as humans. And I always give this awareness to my clients. Whatever you're thinking in your mind is not necessarily real. It's just a story. But we live by those stories. Mm-hmm. And obviously in our environment, and when you study psychology as to how we are perceiving life, the map of this world, it's not the territory really, how we see things. So when you have this insight, when you study psychology, I think science with psychology and philosophy needs to be more connected. Integrated, because our religion is not just one direction. No. And for us to live and understand this entire, lesson that you've given us right now is literally taking us on the journey, like you mentioned, to understanding our way of being and, how we need to be. That's and when we have more awareness, and this insight gives us that when we do get these struggles, it will give us that sense of knowing how to fight that. And I work with clients individually. Obviously, I'm trained with certain techniques, but just knowing that, okay, what is going in my head is not necessarily true. I can counter that. I can challenge that. I can, look from a bird's eye point of view, because so many I deal with people with their relationships as well, and things just go on a tangent without ever any movement, and they're sitting right here. It's all in their head, but they've gone on that journey and they've gone back and forth. Or if their husband, for example, has come late from work, he's done 101 different things and they don't know, and just when he picks up the call, I was just stuck in traffic.
Yes.
But what they have imagined and what they have worked themselves up into, that anxiety and that stress and that fear from their own, it's just unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And we do that all the time. That's just one simple example. That's how we live. So what you're saying is so important.
Yeah, I mean, negativity is such a immediate existence.
We're built in that way, though.
It's part of us. I mean, even the most positive, even the most positive people amongst us experience negativity from time to time. It's part of what makes us human. It's actually one of our defense mechanisms.
Yes.
Just like when I put my finger on a stove,
you're gonna know.
I'm gonna move it away because it's painful, and so that pain signal tells me. Just in the same way, negativity. That's right. So in very small doses, negativity can actually be pretty helpful.
Of course.
So people might have come on thinking that I'm going to completely blow negativity out of the water.
Not.
That's not true entirely.
Even prophets and imams faced negativity.
Absolutely.
They couldn't have been a good leader without facing the negative.
Of course, you don't know the good unless you have the bad or the negative, whichever way you look at it, yes.
But we need to understand, and we need to be very mindful of negativity to understand where it oversteps the mark and starts to become unhealthy and destructive, just like an executor can take a prisoner to his end.
Absolutely.
Negativity can really destroy us.
And humans are also built on habits. I work with people to sort of transform themselves so that they can have better habits. They can be more conscious of what they are doing that serves them and doesn't serve them. And we don't really reflect in order to do this. We do the practicals, Som, Zakat, whichever it may be, Salah. But we do it robotically, without much consciousness and thought. And that's why when you're like, we're praying, but it's not happening, it's not working for us. That's why when I wanted to talk, when you said about spirituality, I think it's so important. Everything that you've said is exactly what I wish I could say it the way you did. But I'm going to take your notes by the end of the day, by the way. But yeah, when you say it like that, it helps a human to understand the way in which they need to think and fight these battles that we have.
I think, from my perspective, when I pray, I try and reflect on the physical creation, because that's the thing that is tangible to me, and just be in awe. I mean, just stepping out in the garden in the middle of the night,
nature,
and looking up. I mean, how often do we look up? How often do we look up?
Yeah, well, I'm a dreamer, so I do it a lot. But yeah, that's why I'm in this field. But no, you're absolutely right. You have to connect with the natural and be present, and all of these things make such a difference. And we always say this, but we think it takes time. But honestly, those few seconds even just before you start your salah,
That's right.
to make that intention,
In
just
fact-
knowing that there's angels watching you. And when you say and explain this to a child, it will even change their demeanor from laughing and messing
Yes.
around,
Yes.
because you've printed that in them.
That's right. I mean, actually, it should start with wudu.
Of course, yes.
And when we do
yes.
our wudu, that is when our spirituality needs to start engaging. And
Mm-hmm.
an example is that when you hold that water in your hand, just stand there for a minute and look at that water,
Reflect,
how
yeah.
clear it is. That is how clear we need to be with our intentions and in our hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about what I said about where this water came from,
Yeah, yeah.
how it arrived here on a ground that was 1,200 degrees Celsius from a distant part of the galaxy, that without which we wouldn't exist. I mean, these are just incomprehensible
Of
miracles.
course.
Coming back to negativity, we need to understand what it is.
Yeah.
So, two people facing exactly the same event, be it a spell of bad luck or a catastrophe.
Yeah, but how they...
Yet the difference is not in the event itself, it is
How
in the
they-
perception
yeah,
of
I
how
know,
we
yeah.
as individuals interact with
Of
that
course.
event and our outlook on it. But as we said, it is essential. Sometimes we can use negativity to our advantage, and a perfect example is regret over our sins. I mean, no better place is there for negativity to take its hold, because we will really benefit from it. And in fact, if we delve deep into it, inshallah, our istighfar will be accepted, because since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give istighfar to anything, His forgiveness is limitless. But our istighfar needs to be with a pure intention.
Yes. Sincere.
And an example will come from Sahifa as-Sajjadiyya, where we say, in one of the 15 whispered prayers for repentance, we say, إلهي إن كان الندم على الذنب توبة فإني وعزتك من النادمين. Oh Allah, if regret itself is enough for me to receive your mercy, then I am the most remorseful.
Yeah.
I am the one who regrets the most of everybody, the sins that I have done. And here, us dwelling on that sin and the gravity of that sin and the disadvantage to us of that sin will shine through in the quality of our istighfar, and inshallah it will be obviously
There's different
accepted.
levels of forgiveness as well, right? I'm not sure, because I've read about this, and sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to know, because a lot of people, they're like, well, I've sinned and I've asked for forgiveness, and so like you're saying, there are different levels in the way in which you have that intention, knowing that, okay, Allah is Ghafur Rahim, but at the same time, you cannot go there consciously trying to think that you're going to repeat it. You might not even be there the next day to even repent for yourself.
That's right.
So these things need to be taken into consideration. Don't take it lightly that there is forgiveness and you are going to be forgiven. So you need to really feel it, and your actions show more of the forgiveness than even your words.
And I will tell you, and maybe the viewers will share this, but one of the biggest catastrophes is Hajj. You know, we spend how much money to go on that
Yes.
plane, and all the preparation that goes in there, all the tiredness, and we fall ill, and the physical exhausting
Yes,
nature
the
of
most
Hajj.
challenging thing, yes.
Knowing at the end of Hajj that we have been forgiven all of our sins. And by the way, it is not acceptable for us to believe for 1 second that if we have performed the Hajj, that our sins are not going to be forgiven.
Okay.
That is the gravity
The
of
ultimate,
Hajj.
There's
That's-
a hadith actually from
Yes.
Jafar Sadiq.
Okay,
The
right.
person who disbelieves that he's not been forgiven has denied the faith.
And his Hajj is
Wow,
not accepted.
That's really powerful.
That we then come back to our life afterwards and repeat those sins.
Yeah.
So
Why do you think people go again and again and again sometimes? Sometimes.
Because they have not sincerely repented. And actually, there are narrations that most of the inhabitants of paradise would be the persons who have repented.
Okay.
That means they did something wrong and seriously
They've
repented.
actually- yeah.
Not
So-
those who are continuously in worship of Allah.
that's right.
Yes.
Because they might be
Yes.
doing robotically.
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Because what you said coined it, actually. Really coined it, in the sense that when one seeks istighfar, seeks the mercy of Allah, one must approach Allah with the intention of never returning to that.
Yes.
That means we must change.
Exactly.
Because if you are the same
Transformation.
person, you are, I guarantee you, and I will put money on the table, that you are going to return to those sins.
Of course.
You have to change.
You have to.
Something has to give, something has to change. And this is where it comes back to what we're saying. and about the steps we take, strategies we take to defend ourselves in this life against those sins. Because ultimately it is those sins that are going to carry us to our ultimate abode.
Yeah.
So if we come back to negativity for a second, we must be mindful of where negativity may overstep the mark, as I said, and start to take over our life, our relationships, our careers, our personal growth, and our long-term fulfillment, which can be hampered. What's more, research has shown that actually negativity can also pave the way for more stress.
Yes, of course.
And more illness than our more positive peers. Not only do negative events and experiences imprint on us more quickly, research has shown that if you were given $50, two people are given $50, one gains $50, the other loses $50. The person who loses the $50 is likely to experience negativity to a much greater magnitude than the positivity in the person who receives those $50. He won't make nothing of it, whereas the person who loses, generally when we lose things, we make much bigger of a deal than when we gain things. And actually most of us when we gain things are very passive.
Yes.
And we forget Allah.
Exactly.
We forget to say Alhamdulillah.
When studying psychology, it's very funny you say that. It always also comes because it's like saying that when we are creatures that adapt. So even though we think that we're going to be happy with something, but when we get it all the time, it's like you having the nice car, but then you look at something else, we want it more and more and more. So we are creatures that adapt. So we can't just think that, oh, we're going to go for that success and it's going to actually fulfill us completely, because we have to strive continuously and it never ends. Because as humans, we can never just be stable in that one way.
And this what's called negativity bias is what leads us to become more negative, even if something positive happens.
Yes, a downward spiral. Yeah.
It's a downward spiral. We have to be mindful of that.
Yes.
We have to put the brakes on there because, as I said, this has led to a lot of depression, anxiety. This is one of the fundamental root causes for a lot of people who actually...
Unfortunately, we have only 3 minutes left, so we have to breeze through. But when you was talking, when we were studying about this quickly, we were saying that when we have this downward spiral and people complain and they get to it, it's also because there's a payoff, because there's either for attention. So you've got to study human behaviors, human mind, even if it's conscious or not. There are ways that you have to understand the way in which the human works in their mind, the brain, and I did a bit of neuroscience as well as the capacity of change and the ability, because we always have these cliches of we're never going to change, we can't when we're older. We are definitely able to. And I don't want to interrupt you even more, but we only have a few minutes left.
I'm just going to wrap up really with a verse from the Quran again. In Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 216, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it may be that you dislike a thing while it is good for you. And it may be that you love a thing while it is evil for you. Indeed, Allah knows while we know not. This is all about us having a balanced approach in our life to everyday matters, whether it is big or small. In life, we cannot approach everything with absolute optimism, nor can we approach everything with absolute pessimism. Certain events can drive us to feel desperate, while others give us hope. We must always mix them together. So you ought to be realistic and give optimism a certain dose of pessimism so that you act cautiously.
Yes.
And at the same time give pessimism a dose of optimism so that you will not fall under the negativity of that pessimism, which will ultimately lead you to desperation.
Now, this is a skill and it's something that we need to develop, and there's many, obviously, practical ways of doing that. Can you maybe quickly sum up a couple of things that we can continue to strive towards, gaining this balance?
I think one thing is we need to release our expectations. Okay. We need to reduce our expectations in life. Happy people are happy because they have a skill set for handling bad things. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen to them.
And it's momentary.
Put your mind on a positivity diet, and essentially it's just a healthy diet. Eat well. You are what you eat.
Nutrition is amazing, yeah.
Unleash your anger and frustration. Come to my martial arts classes. I very happily stand there with a bag, and you go for it. It's very therapeutic.
You're going to see me next.
It's very therapeutic.
Of course, yes.
Start your day positively.
Yeah, the thoughts are so important.
Always important. Have a shower. It always works very well. Distance yourself from negative people, but I exercise caution here.
Yes.
Because actually, if you if you are good at these things, then bring yourself closer to negative people, because
So
you
you
will
can
find
brush
that
off
you
them.
will grow.
Yeah.
Your resilience will grow, and you will benefit them.
Yes, exactly.
And change your self-talk.
Oh yeah.
You know, we often say, you know, oh, I'm so bad at these things, rather than
Exactly.
say, why am I bad at these things? How can I improve?
Yes.
You know, so what we say to ourselves.
These are all NLP techniques, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
self-talk and
That's right.
the language is so
You know,
important.
we have to talk. We have to be a friend to ourselves.
Absolutely,
And
you
that,
have to
that
be
is where it
kind.
ultimately we have to be kind. There is a saying that says, "Do unto others as you would wish to do unto yourself."
Absolutely.
Well, you are the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Thank you so much. I could listen to you for another hour. Unfortunately, we don't have the time because it was so enlightening. And thank you so much, Said, once again for joining us and giving us, the extra backing of knowing that, your studies have really embarked on a journey where what we're trying to only learn now, it's obviously been there for so many years and generations, and we're just trying to evolve and give people a time where we can reflect and live today practically in this day and age. Our religion is definitely current. It is definitely positive and for us.
Imam Ali used to say, don't curse this world, but this
No.
world has been the place of worship of many prophets and
Absolutely,
imams.
That's right.
absolutely.
So he used to teach us not to be negative as well.
Definitely. Negativity, like we said, is there, but we need to have the things in place in order to help. Get a life coach, have a doctor, have a Sayyid by your side. So I'm really blessed to have all of this, and inshallah we will be back with many topics, and enjoy this auspicious day, and we will be hopefully getting more calls next week. But if there's any other questions, please call into the studio. We can still get in contact with any of the guests that are here that you want to be in touch with and get any more knowledge and learning. Thank you so much for today and your patience in listening to us, and I hope it was very beneficial. It certainly was to me, so eye-opening and very much knowledge which I even didn't think that I could even gain from today. But thank you so much for watching, dear viewers. Inshallah we will be back next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.